there's real things with women when we talk about that ability to fail, is that you get into these environments and you feel that pressure double, that you cannot fail because you are one of the few that has been invited into that space. And if you fail, what does it mean not only for you personally, but what could it mean for the other women that come into the space?
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with Coach Luca. In this episode, I welcome Ottawa Women's FC head coach as well as owner and mentor of the fearless, capable Candice Fabry. It was such a pleasure to speak to Candice about her experiences and how much she delves into supporting women in sports and her advocacy for the campaigns and how women can grow and develop through her mentoring program, as well as creating further opportunities for women within sport, their recognition and the opportunities that need to present themselves in sport to make it more of an equal sport all round. Now, this is a sport in football, sport in rugby, sport entirely where there needs to be further representation of women. Within this episode, myself and Candice talk about opportunities for women within sport, their benchmark within soccer, and that Candice is a firm advocate and campaigner for women within sport, whereby the Fearless Capable company supports women with mentoring and coaching opportunities. I'd recommend this company to all people, all women within sport, or sports persons existing, allowing women to grow and support within their campaigns, as well as creating those equal opportunities and fair playing ground. This is a great program because you have someone who's so relentless, passionate and energetic, who would be such a great mentor and is such a good person to know as well within the sport. In this episode, we talk about being more trauma informed as coaches and professionals, delving deeper into the understanding of players. There is so much that is covered within that is not covered within coaching courses, nor recognised by every coach. And trauma is such a major thing to be aware of, and certainly have in the back of your mind when working with players, whether you give them experiences, whether it's something you talk about, whether it's how they react to things, think about things. Perspectives are really important, whether new teammates come on board, how these relationships pan out. There's a lot of players a lot that goes on in the psychology of these players' minds, and there's a lot to really consider and support them. And being trauma informed isn't something that's always talked about, but it's certainly a big consideration, especially when working with people. And it's great to support young people on their platform and journey, and we don't always take into consideration in terms of their experiences and what they might have to overcome. And you know, in terms of the environments, the backgrounds, the cultures, the nationalities of players, these are all considerations from what shapes them. And as I keep saying, Rio Ferdinand's quote, "You're a product of your environment." So therefore, the trauma experiences that young people, individuals, groups can certainly play a part in terms of their performance and how they are within certain environments. So I think that's really important to really highlight there and have that consideration. This is why the Reflective Coach podcast is here to support your journey, to give you these insights, stories, opportunities to reflect, and tips from coaches as well as other professionals. So you may hear educators, teachers, teaching assistants, educational psychologists, mind coaches, mentors. The list is endless in terms of the guests we've had on and who are going to come up in the future. And this interlinks so nicely with every episode with this reflective journey that we're on. So it's really something to be aware of and something for yourselves as coaches to go and look on furthermore. Now, you might not even be a coach, but you might be a professional listening to this as well, and you might be an educator, and there's so much that you can be aware of within the classroom, within the teaching environments that you have, and so much more when working with individuals. Candice further talks about lived experiences and how experiences can trigger the experiences in others. This relates further onto our previous point of trauma, but again, these experiences and spaces are so important to be aware of. This is something that we need to be aware of. And in addition to that, she talks about giving voices to minorities. We also talk about in this episode the consistent application, loving the sport even when it may hate you back at times, discovering more about yourself and continue to coach, talking about teaching a game. How can I make this game as fun as possible? Now, that is a key question that every coach should have in the back of their mind, especially when coaching young players and starting them out on their journey. Now, we might want to equip them, we might want to give them as much as possible, we might want to set them up to be the best players that they can be. but we need to make it as fun as possible, especially from a younger age, because we want to create lifelong participants, especially if they give up the game at a later point and come back to it. They're still going to be a lifelong participant, or whether they walk away from playing but still involved in the background of coaching staff, or they've progressed elsewhere, or if they don't make it as professional or even semi-pro, can they still play even as they get older and enjoy it? And then they'll take that enjoyment away, and they'll still have those lived experiences, which have been those fun moments. We also talk about supporting and coaching players to deprogram poor habits. Getting into their minds whilst looking at the technical side of their game is a key consideration, especially when working with older players. Certainly when they've had many other coaches and experiences over the years. They might already have those bad habits which they formed, they might already be programmed in certain ways, and it's about how we can go back and deprogram and further support them in their development. In addition, we talk about ingrained cultures, influencing spaces within sports, equality and equity, risk and conflict, failure and rewards. There is so much in this episode, and it was wonderful to speak to Candice, and I can't wait to have her on again. This episode is jam-packed full of considerations and key learning points, and there's so much to delve off in and research further on. There is so much within this episode. You can listen to this episode on Spotify, Anchor and Podcast Addict. You can also watch the podcast on YouTube. The podcast can be found on Twitter and LinkedIn. It is TRC Podcast _ on Twitter, as well as Anthony _ Luca 96, and the Reflective Coach Podcast everywhere else. Drop a like, drop a follow, drop a subscribe. This is the Reflective Coach Podcast with Coach Luca, featuring Candice Fabry. Thank you for your time, enjoy the episode, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. I'm good, you alright?
Yeah.
Good. How's your day been?
It's been all right. Got the kids out the door. And headed to Wichita, Kansas, which is about a 3-hour drive from Kansas City, to coach all day tomorrow. Next Sunday. So yeah.
Sounds fascinating weekend ahead of you, and for them as well, which is life filled full of coaching.
Yeah, I've got my A license. We've had courses were not held over the holiday, so we've had 2.5-hour classes every night. So get to the hotel to do that tonight, grab a beverage afterwards, go to bed, and then do the same thing tomorrow. So yeah,
that's pure commitment. I love it. I truly love it.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's fun.
How's the A license going though? Has it been all right, or?
Yeah, we're just at the beginning. So I go for our first in-person week at the end of this month. So we're really in the beginning stages. A lot of periodization talk this week and planning and kind of getting those pieces set. But yeah, it just started in basically December, so should be done around September.
Oh, good luck to you, and it should be good.
Yeah.
Does the UEFA license then get tailored towards the American way or philosophy then, or?
I know there's a lot of conversation around what equivalence or any sort of relationship. It's typically viewed as two separate, and they don't really put a lot of emphasis or any sort of discussion on it. But I do know a lot of coaches that either go up the UEFA pass or simultaneously do US soccer and UEFA, or do US soccer and then UEFA. I know I had a friend send along some initiative for females and female coaches for the UEFA license. So I was like, put that for another day, but that would be awesome to participate in that and go through it. But yeah, there's a good distinction that they try to make between the two. So
yeah, of course, and it's interesting. It's good that the American system has a license and pathway that you can continue on, and sort of fits into the American way. Whereas more here in Wales, we sort of have like a level 1, whereas your football leaders and you do all like your foundation levels, and then when you sort of get onto your UEFA C, UEFA B, A, and so on, it's all tailored. It's all UEFA, but it's all tailored the Welsh way. So you do UEFA badge through the Welsh system.
Right.
So it's fairly interesting.
Yeah, and that is something that I know, talking to a handful of international coaches from time to time is really then, what is that pathway? And for US soccer, I do like, because I took my B license in 2009. So I mean, I had then 2 kids and life happened, and so being able to get to my A license took some time. But now that's in it, it's completely tailored. Everything I'm doing is tailored to the team I'm coaching, but a lot of it is stemmed into the principles in which U.S. soccer looks at it. So it it's interesting because you get to bring in your own concepts, your own whys, your own organization to it. But there's certainly a lot that ties into, what our national teams are doing. And, for me, the women's side is fun to watch, and the men's side is an embarrassment right now. So, yeah.
Absolutely, that's a lot of what I'm seeing all over Twitter and socials. Is it's a bit all over the place, the men's side at the minute, and it's quite astounding
Yeah.
to see from the outside and the difference between only a couple of months between the end of the World Cup to where it is. Because no matter what comments you read through, there seems to be some very little in support, and some who are, and the majority which are like, no, let's get rid.
Yeah. I've been taking a little bit of time, and this whole Reina Berhalter drama is another, unfortunate but real issue in the American system, and really showing that it happens at all levels, which is not a good thing. That there needs to be an evaluation at really how we look at this game in our country. But it, unfortunately, I think the powers to be are not probably going to be people that will stand up to make it any different. And so I think there's a lot to be said about the people on the ground that are doing the work to try to make systems fair, less of the good old boys club, the influencing decision makers when it comes to the price of things, to get that access and get those players that really deserve to be at the highest ranks, with the best coaches and the best systems in there, despite whatever background they come from financially. And so it's pretty flawed in a lot of ways. And I primarily work on the female side. I do some coaching on the male side. So, but it's not great right now. It's not. We're missing a lot, and we're losing a lot at the same time. So
And
it's
every
tough.
coach I've spoken to this week, I've spoken to quite a few American coaches, and they all seem to have different responses in terms of the American game and the way that it sort of goes, because they say it's not as fluent right across America to what it could or should be. And from the outside, it's quite interesting to see this growth of the American game, and it's quite exciting to see what it could be, and how much it can expand, because you already have an amazing foundation in terms of high school, college, club program,
Yep.
and all these showcase events, which I think is incredible from the outside, and just to see it all over socials. And
Yeah.
but it's just mad how different you speak to one coach in one state and then one coach in another. How different the soccer is state to state.
Yeah, there's no, and that's what I think is a bigger part of the issue is you've got a mass amount of people, and because there's not this ingrained culture in it, it's pulling from the experiences of other sports in our country, football, American football. You're pulling from baseball and people's influence in those spaces that come to this game, and they don't quite realize the nuances or the beauty that exists within it, and that there is beauty in having some cohesiveness and having some, um, you know, if even just a lens that has more than just a result tied to it. That passion that comes from having a home club, from having that growing up and watching others. So I think we're just getting into that, and that's why there is a huge influx. But at the same time, those showcases, though, look from the outside in amazing to the opportunities, and there is. But when you walk around as a college coach, and I'm recruiting, and I look around and some of the behaviors of coaches, and then you look as a coach going, man, if I take one of their players, what am I going to have to deprogram?
Absolutely.
And regardless of the skill, what am I deprogramming in habits? What am I deprogramming in their expectations? That very much right now, like, I get yelled at and that makes me better. So can you yell at me? And I'm like, why? Why does me, a screaming coach from the sideline feel impactful to you? And so there's that. That's where I go to, like, the American football, the coach on the side throwing, their headphones, throwing the clipboards, all of these things that have just been, the epitome of what coaching looks like in America. And it's terrifying. It's really turned into something quite ugly. The good part is that with social media, though, we are trying to get to more conversations. More things are being put out in the public eye. You screw up and there's a camera around, you could go viral. So do you want to do that? And we had that situation 2 summers ago, or last summer. I coach a UWS, a semi, like a pro am women's team here in Kansas City, and we played another one, and it was our second team in that level, and a coach went off on the referees just mad. I mean, I hadn't seen something like that in a really long time. And the camera, we had a VO, and the VO, he stood right under that VO, and he just, everything was captured. And the referees somehow got it, and they leaked it out, and it went viral in ways on Facebook, and it was nuts. It was unbelievable. And he's then worried about the threats on his family, which, I get no one wants, but at the same time, he was out there threatening referees lives over a UWS 2 game,
Of
a
course, yeah.
semi-pro second level. Like, there's nobody here getting paid anything worth enough of, referees included for that type of discussion. So it was to kind of see it firsthand and going, so now you're sorry, and you're only sorry because you got caught.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting
So it's
viewpoint in terms of that, how, you say, the online platform, which is great, but it creates more scrutiny, which is providing that benefit to regulate the game across the country, which, hopefully will improve the standards and implementation of what the design will be long term.
For sure. And I think that's where the decision makers within US soccer, within US youth, within US club, all of the professional leagues from, the MLS, the NWSL, to all the leagues that follow underneath it. I mean, I think right now the beauty is that there is a lot more discussion about what is being discovered. The concern will be, well, now we know some more real facts of lived experiences from all viewpoints and stakeholders, from owners to coaches, athletic trainers, everybody, down to the players, and knowing that there's real problems, and we know we're not successful. The women's stage were successful at the very top, but I think the English clubs are doing a much better job in the women's league in a lot of areas, despite the NWSL having some, a handful of superstars. But we've seen how many American players come over to, English football clubs of Chelsea and Man City, because of what is structured there, with Lindsay Horan right now. It's they see an opportunity, and unless we start to really look at what our game does from the top down, we're going to spin in ways that we're not going to find success as long term as they think we will. And it's really, really, it's exciting, but it's sad because there's an opportunity. And so who are the decision makers that can help this? And I think there's a lot in, particularly I would say our age group, from the 18-year-olds to really that 40 to 45, going, what, we do have an opportunity here to change what this looks like in the next 10 to 20 years. And so what are we going to do about it? And having a voice and finding a voice, and somewhat is the older generation allowing us a voice, bringing us there. So we'll see. We'll see.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting, again, that you say, what we're doing over here in the UK in terms of England is great programming. Obviously, you're losing players, which is what you don't want to do, because it defeats the whole object of the system. Because I speak to so many, athletes and players which have left the US, and when I've done some background research, they've got amazing credentials from college and high school, and their programs that they've been on, and you're like, wow, it's amazing on paper. And it's like they've got to the end of this process line, and then there's nothing in America for them, and then they've had to leave their amazing process to go abroad to try and source being a professional footballer. And it's so sad, and it's such a shame, because there should be something like that at the end of the road for them to correspond with how amazing the college and high school programs have been.
Nope, 100%. And I think, you're going to come down to here. It's where I think, there needs to be a lot more funding, and it's happening in the women's game across the world. But I certainly believe that here, like, that greed at the youngest ages is what's going to prohibit some of that longitude, escalation from, this is my club, this is who I play for, this is the environment I grow up in, this is what I believe, and then getting those higher levels where the professionalism meets and matches kind of those expectations you've seen. But the greed at the youngest levels really, I think, provides environments where priorities are shifted, and priorities aren't shifted in the best interest of the players and their long-term development. It really comes down to the money that can be made off of parents who believe there's an opportunity, which, there is for some, and for others, it's a lifelong passion of the game that doesn't look with the national team badge on your chest. But that's okay. You can still love the game for, the rest of your life, with your path not being that, and parents being okay when they say they want more but they don't understand what more looks like for a 15-year-old, being away from home, social, all of that. They just don't understand it here, and but they want it because it's the American way. We want more. We always
Yeah,
want more, right?
absolutely. And what I've heard a lot of is this. You have a very big system of pay to play over there, and what does that mean? How does that look like? Because I've heard bits of it, I've heard snippets, but I couldn't explain it to someone else.
Yeah, I think the best way I could describe it is the fact that you're not your access comes down your access in the game. And when I say access, I say facilities, level of coaching, um, even equipment and gear comes down to how much you can pay. And
Right.
so if you don't have the resource, you don't get the options. I know for a lot, and I was in a not a high level youth club. It was the Rush brand, which is a pretty big youth organization, youth soccer brand in America. It's got establishments in almost all the states and internationally as well. But from even there, trying to get sponsorship dollars to sponsor kids that were less fortunate in the financial ring, to be able to cover the cost of what opportunities we could bring them to and showcases we could bring them to and things that we could put them into spaces to be seen. I know in one of the tryouts I had for a men's or a young youth boys state team here in Kansas, one player, he was showing bits and pieces of good football, creative, and then we noticed his shoe size was about one or two sizes too big. And come to find out, he just got the shoes that were in the bucket that he could find. And so, even just the proper gear that you imagine what he could be doing if his feet weren't slipping out of his boots, 90% of the time. And so I think that's the part where, that's the best way I can say it, is that if you don't have the financial resources, you don't have the access. And that's the best and simplest way to say it is
And it's
the more
scarily
you
sad,
have.
massively sad, because obviously as you go to different states around America, obviously some are more deprived than others, and there is so much hidden talent and so much talent which isn't tapped into. When you
Right.
look at the size of America and the geographical location and the population, America could and should have the biggest pool of players available, but it's not. And then you're looking at the World Cup going, well, seeing criticisms from fans going, well, why are we picking a player from this league or this club? And you're like, well, you should have the highest standards of athletes available because of the college and high school programs and because of
Mm-hmm.
the population. So I think it's definitely going to grow, and it's going to be interesting because it won't be happening in the next 5 years. It'll definitely be a 30-year program, which I think between now and 30 years it'll be incredibly massive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is exciting, but it's how you get to that point, and you know how you implement programs and strategies and what work is done at clubs and the work that you're doing in terms of what you do with your business in terms of then the female side is really
Mm-hmm.
interesting concepts, and hopefully it continues to grow in the way that it should go.
That's the goal, is that if I can do a little bit for a couple, to make the experience. I've had a good experience in the game. I'm not going to sit here. I wouldn't be in the game still if I didn't have quality experiences that make me want to stay and still love it. But certainly there's been a lot of areas that just weren't what it should have ever been, what it should have been prioritized. It's just been not easy. And I did get through a lot because I had great mentors. I had people in the game that I said, okay, there's a pureness to them. There's a pureness in their joy for the game, what the game brings, talking about the game, teaching the game. And those are people that I gravitated to. And, I saw them doing things on small and big scales to make it better for others. And that's really what I've started to find is my voice and passion for doing that, is making it better. So for the athletes I work with, how can I make the game as fun as it can be in that day, even if the session is massively loaded? How do they still walk out loving what they just did? To the days that we're just meditating and recovering, and they just love the fact that they're meditating on the field and they get to be one with the grass and just enjoying what that looks like. And so how do we create those? And that's been part of the mentorship I've tried to do with women, is a lot of them have had some really rough experiences. And so, but they still love the game. So how do you love something that, I don't know if you've read the book, Loving Sports or Loving Sports When They Hate You Back or something. I'll have to look at the title and send it to you, but it's
That'd be
really
great.
insightful in a lot of ways. Have you read it?
No, I haven't. No, I'm just making a note of it now because that sounds, interesting, and it's a great concept when you say that. Is how can you love the sport when they hit you back, and that just the title away is opening up so many thoughts right now.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's the part where, you know, you hope that, and I know there are others like me where, there were times I had to completely step away from everything, soccer, football related, because it wasn't good for my mental health, my physical health, the relationships I was having, and who I was as a person, because the game was terrible around me. Now, every time I would step on and coach, that's when I felt the most natural. I felt the most authentic, the most relief. But it took a lot, and to be really honest, I mean, it's to a point now in my career where I have the opportunity to pick and choose. And that took a lot of stress, and took stepping away and discovering myself without the game and going, I don't like that version more. So how do I have the game involved in my life, but having to find spaces where I do feel valued and I feel challenged but supported. And, as much as we need to do for our players, which is allow them to fail, and then have the opportunity to learn. I think we sometimes miss that as adults, is that, failure is a part of this as much as we allow it for our players. We need to take our own advice, allow ourselves to fail and pick back up. And if we're not in environments that are okay with a bit of failure because we try, then we're not going to succeed, because we're just in that same panic mode that we sometimes instill in our own athletes.
Of course, and there's so many interesting points there which you talk about, and especially failure within adults. I was speaking to someone earlier, and they work in a community setting, and they said about how they set up a community program for adults to try and get them involved in increased participation, and their target audience was females who've never played football before. And I was like,
Yeah.
how do you get to a target audience who've never played? How do you get through that? But I said there's a lot of stigma which adults attach to themselves, and a barrier because they don't want to be seen as failures, and going back into it, whether it's 20,
Mhm.
30, 40, and going, right, I might get this wrong, I'm going to get this wrong in front of other people, I don't want to get to this. And they might open up experiences they've had as a child, and it's quite difficult for adults to be in that context of failure because adults don't like to associate themselves with that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And it's a complete great environment when a coach like yourself can create that and really open up and harness where it's completely fine to get things wrong.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I strive to just even role model on the pitch. So, my college team got to a point where, for some reason, I don't know why, but like the bib color, it's an orange, or it's a pink bib, and I call it orange. I, maybe there's something diagnosed in my head that I don't know about, but I cannot name the color properly. And so by the beginning of the season, they were all like, and this was my first season with this college team, and they wouldn't say anything. And then I was like, if I say the wrong color, just correct me. I'm not offended. I am going to make mistakes as simple as naming it the wrong color or the cone color or whatever. And so by the end, they'd be like, Coach, that's red, or Coach. And so they found that empowerment, and they could see as an adult that I would not take a mistake or something personally, that they could call us out and correct it on something that's a fact. If there's a fact there and that's what I think for women in particular is that, there's a lot of language like I'm sorry, or, I think, and it's like, no, state it as a fact. It's a belief. And so if I can help to empower young women to see themselves as having a voice, they have it, but utilizing it and using it and putting it out there, be empowered to, on things that can be as simple as a fact that someone needs to know. It makes it better. It makes it clearer. And it could be as simple as a bib color, but it also can go into their, professional experiences beyond, the game and the level they're at that moment. And so that's where I think, if we look at the landscape of female coaches, Not only is as general as adults do we struggle with failure and our embarrassment, our ego, the sensitivity to what others are going to then think of us as females who, in a lot of ways culturally have been, we don't talk first. We come, quiet, don't be a loudmouth. If you're loud or, very opinionated, we get called that B word. Those things, those are just a part of what it is. If any female is very boastful in what they're talking about or successes, they're bragging, where, and that's a negative thing, where men, we tend to go, it's just guys being guys. And so there's real things with women when we talk about that ability to fail, is that you get into these environments and you feel that pressure double, that you cannot fail because you are one of the few that has been invited into that space. And if you fail, what does it mean, not only for you personally, but what could it mean for the other women that come into this space? And that's not just a perception. That is a reality with data. The Tucker Center out of the University of Minnesota does a lot of research on females in sport, women and girls participating and working in sport. And I believe, one of the research pieces, and I might get the data wrong, but I believe women on average had 2 less years as a college head coach at the Division I level to have a successful winning record than men. So we were given 2 less years to find that success compared to men on average. And so where is that? Well, factually, we know we have to be good. We have to be perfect. We have to be successful, or we risk it, because a lot of what's been told is that what we look like isn't equating to success and leadership. It looks different, it sounds different. And so, you add that into this culture of being adults and afraid to make mistakes. It's a really, really perfect storm for women to find themselves in the game as coaches, whatever, and saying, this isn't for me, and walking away, when the reality is it can be for them. The game is evolving. It's taking a very, very, very slow pace and evolving, but it's getting there. And there are spaces that will value women and the success they can have. Obviously, just even looking at, the English women's national team, and, what she did with the Netherlands team, like these female coaches, and the Canadian, national team as a female now, these things are important when we look at role modeling and representation, because we know there had to be failures. There had to be, you don't get to the top without failing at some point, but they certainly found ways to succeed. And so how do we model that failure, but also leads to success? And that's got to have some mindset components for that, that they find that. And I did have the good fortune of listening to Jill Ellis, who found some good ways to put that in. That failure was absolutely part of the road.
Absolutely.
That's her mindset.
There's so many amazing points there, and when you especially talk about mindset, it can be difficult then to have that mindset when that research, which is incredible, and you've been given 2 less years, is then how you approach that and change the mindset of others, because you are being given two less years in reality, and it takes away sometimes the credibility of the work of what the females are doing, and about trying to create longevity in what they're trying to instill, because things don't happen overnight. And if you're giving females less time to do a job compared to a male, then it's this underrepresentation, misrepresentation of where they can be, and then suddenly what role models are created through the system, and then other females are going, well, they're getting sacked, and look at the rates of success, and then suddenly the females' participation engagement declines. And it all comes down to the amazing work that you're doing with your company, but that's such an interesting sort of factor and way to open up about that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is that, we want to sit here and say that, it's easy for people outside to go, no, it's not true. But there's now data on women working in the game, and it's new. It's not, overly comprehensive, but it's certainly starting to emerge. And when I can have conversations, and I think the bigger part of this is who's making the decisions, these owners, these athletic directors, the people at the top, the boards making the decisions. Those are the people that need the most education the most facts of what is really the lived experiences of most women in this game, they're not looking at it, they're not considering it. It's really the access point that most of us have in this working professional culture of, either whether it's entry level or whether we've been in it for a while, and going, wow, this data's coming out, and some of these things I thought were true, okay, now they are, like, we have facts. Well, this still doesn't look great for me. How do I know how I'm going to put clothes on my body, food in front of me, and a shelter over my head, regardless if I want to be a mom? That's a whole nother discussion
Yeah.
that gets brought into this. And I think that's always a really, really big misconception, is that, well, then they want to be a mother. That's a whole nother can of worms that we don't necessarily even need to honestly put just on the females. We need to include men that are parents, whether they're biologically or step parents, men that want to be a parent. That is a large commitment as well. And we need to talk about their balance in the game, not just put it to women. But, to really get into what I was getting at is, how do we get this information to the decision makers, those people at the top who understand that there have been conscious and unconscious bias for years. And really, I think that is where we need to start seeing more women entering that space, getting to that space. And they are slowly but surely getting onto boards, getting into ownerships, to start helping make those decisions. But I think, even at the local levels, at the smallest grassroots, take a look around. And if your board of directors and your staff, same gender, same color of skin, same, even country or location of origin, you might want to ask yourself, how many lived experiences are you really getting to diversify your ideas and really even get ahead of the curve? Because to me, it's too much. When I look at a club that has the same people all at the top, I go, I wonder where their creativity or their willingness to maybe think outside of what's only been done and think about what could be done for the future, for the betterment of themselves, of the game, of the players they're working for. And yeah, it's troublesome, but I know there's safety in what you know.
Of course, and
There's a lot of
and again, there's so much which you could pull apart from that. And as you say, it's how you break that maybe stigma and have that willingness to create that creativity, to open up a space to allow a female to come in. And that's what it sort of comes down to. If you look at the English teams, for example, between League Two, and the Premier League, it just takes one of those clubs for someone to go, right, we're employing a female, to then open up that whole world of employing females on the male side and having a female manager. I think it's just a case of one club needs to do it, but then they're all conscious of, like, if I make this decision, we're going to be the first club that does it. What scrutiny will we be under? How will the fans react? How will this look from marketing preferences? If we then sack her, how will it look? And obviously, there's a lot of risk around whoever you employ.
Mhm.
But then I just think it's difficult because it just takes one club to change it. But I think they're all waiting, looking at each other, going, who's going to be the first one to do it? And no one really wants to take that step forward to taking ownership of it.
Because they're not looking at the reward, they're looking at the risk. And it's a good thing to do anytime you're making a massive decision. I always say risk and rewards, what are they? Look at them. And I'm somebody that values, you have to have data and feelings anytime you're doing that, because that then helps you to evaluate what your risk and your rewards are. But I also think that the, the hard part, as being a minority in this game, is that it's almost telling us that we don't equate to success. We're too risky. And I think that's where one of the most simplest things people can do, the most simple things you can do on social media, anywhere, is celebrate females succeeding. Because the more we put into that, when they succeed, putting all of that love, attention, retweets, likes, everything, we then can start to get the dollar signs behind those investments of success with a female there. And so I think that's the part that's almost simple for all of us to do. Buying tickets to matches, buying season tickets, doing the coaching, all of those are money driven things. But like, there are very free ways that people can go in that love the women's game, that help to support the investment dollars and the decision makers to have some influence, that women do equate to success. That the risk you're assuming, because you're just assuming, and fairly you can only assume because there are no precedents of what's already been there. But I think the fact of the matter is that, you look at what human nature is we gravitate to things that make us feel comfortable. That's human nature. Risk is something that people struggle with, so therefore we will have this, I think, this dilemma, unfortunately, for a lot longer than any of us want to, because women have to sit and feel like they're less than. So you then, that pool of willing women to go through and keep battling for those top roles is going to shrink, because again, the perception is we're not equating to success. So that pool shrinks, and then you have the natural humanistic qualities of those at the top that say, I want comfort, I want to limit my risk. And there's a lot of risk in the unknown, which is women at the top making big decisions, especially leading a men's football club. And so it's almost like a math equation that's always going to equal to the unknown, and until somebody is brave enough to do that. And I think the other piece would be that we all realize that, how many clubs has Mourinho been at? Where has he been successful? Where has he failed? And he still gets a job. Why can't that be the same for women? Why? Like, what is really at the heart of the difference? And some will be complete. You will get online, and I think, as you were kind of alluding to, you get online and you'll see the absolute sexist comments, racist comments, when we're talking race, of absolute, just derogatory things that say we should have no right to be there. We're not equal in any way, when the reality is that there's some brilliant soccer minds. Emma Hayes is one of the people that I try to listen to, watch, and every opportunity I possibly can. A brilliant mind in the game, and we need to take stock that can equate to women. But we also need to understand when people go, where are they? Well, we've done a lot to get rid of a lot. We are all at fault in some way. We've done a lot to tell them they're not really welcome here, and they don't really have a chance to succeed here. The spots are limited. So,
of course, yeah, and even when you do look at it that way, and trying to get a female into the male game, essentially, let's label it the male game, because it is dominated. We are having females come through, whether they're physios, whether they're starting to become fitness coaches, S&C coaches, and so
right.
on. We are starting to see them break through, but the game is still very male dominated, and I think that is going to be a change that we get through. But even if we were to say the female game, then, where it is, tailored to female football, trying to get more female coaches, although these females aren't breaking into these high positions of management, we're seeing males break into the female game as managers, and it's sort of that unfair balance where you have the male game, which is dominated by males, but then they're going into the female game and taking over, and then there's even less females in those because those males are going into those sectors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's twofold. I think, again, I will always go back to, what is comfortable and what we know. And what we know, if I type in the word coach on Google, if I type in just coach, it comes out typically a white male. Those are the first images I'm going to see. So that is where, what we know and what we're used to equate to success and less risk is that. So that is where, again, the decision makers in the women's games, again, tend to be people who are going to weigh the risk and reward, and so they don't. So I do think, the structure of things are going to give opportunities, but the same conversation we're having in the men's game has to happen in the women's game, is that we have to equate that there is going to be opportunities that need to truly be evaluated based off of the talents of the person, and realizing the opportunities and the doors open have been different. And that's where this really comes into equity, the equality versus equity conversation, and where that is not, in a lot of people's mindset, really well defined. They see it as the same thing, and it's really not. If I look at a male coach and a female coach, and let's say the skill sets are pretty similar in terms of their coaching abilities, their IQs, their player management, team management, all of it, the doors have been wider in opportunity for the men than they have been for the women. The door was opened, and who is it opened by? And I think that's always the question. Who's it opened by? Well, it's the people at the top. And who are the people at the top? So until we start getting more women at the top, we have, high level decision makers that are males that don't just, you know, say, listen, give me your ideas and I'll tell the boardroom. They literally move their chair over and they put the seat of the woman there with the lived experiences at the table. And they don't just put one, they put multiple. Quick tangent. One woman, it's a token female that's just the hey, give us your female perspective, and the room moves on. If you have two females and there's a disagreement between the two, it fulfills the cat fight stereotype that women just are catty and they go at each other. So where we can get three or more women in a space is actually the best thing we can do, because having three or more women fights the whole, the cat thing, and it removes the tokens piece, and it also allows for the women to find their voice in a more, honestly, a better situation where they're going to be critically challenged to then articulate and have better thoughts, because they're not just the token and appreciate it for their one female viewpoint. We as females have different viewpoints. Shocking. So go into that fact of the matter, and kind of going back to this open door, who can we get to open the door? Who can not just shift their chair over, but push a chair? And then who honestly will give up their chair for a female who is just as equally as capable, but the door hasn't been as wide open for her, and remove themselves to put her in, and not just mentor her, but advocate and honestly endorse. Men at the top can endorse women. When they can endorse women, not just mentor them, go tell their friends how good they are and what they're capable of, that's when we're going to start seeing change. There's a lot of good mentorship, but we need a lot more endorsement. And that's one of the things I talk to. There's this great male allies in this game. I mean, there are men who want to see women succeed. They want to see them have those opportunities, and they see when they don't. But, they're like, well, what can I do? I go, endorse. Go tell your friends how good she is. Go endorse her qualities as a person, as a coach, not as a female, as a coach and a person. Sell that, because that is what we need to have happen more in this game quicker, to be able to escalate those women into those higher level decision making, power influence decisions, or positions, excuse me.
Absolutely. And even then, when you take it into your own role yourself as head coach, do you see yourself having even more responsibility of advocating the game for other females then?
Yeah, I don't see my male colleagues having to take on the burden of being both their own manager of managing everything it does to run a team, but then also being able to speak on females in the game and all these other things. It's like the roles and responsibilities are assumed that I'm going to advocate. I love doing it, but I know there are women that it's just not their space to do. And it's not because they don't want to. They want to see more women. It's just not their thing. They would rather, solely focus on it. But there's an assumption of roles and responsibilities that are added to your your resume or your interview, that assumes you're going to be a voice for that. And I think it's difficult. Like, we were in my husband works in the game as well, and so we happened to be at the same event, and it was a male event, all boys, in Orlando, Florida. And so we're both there the whole time, and I think I was one of two females throughout the whole camp. And it was all the whole country was, all the states are represented, and all the regions, excuse me. And we're next to each other a lot, dinners and so on. And he knew I got asked more about the kids. That's just something, but he didn't realize how imbalanced it was, that I was constantly asked about the kids and how the kids were doing and how I was doing being away from the kids. And he was asked the questions about the game. It was, and at points I even got to the point going, I didn't talk to the kids this morning. You can ask their father, who's standing right there, because I have no idea how the kids are. But he just got to see firsthand how imbalanced it was with the two of us right there. That those were not questions that were asked to the two of us. It was really heavy on my side of the children questions, and more the emotional, not the game. And that's where, again, you kind of sit of it and you remind yourself that they do see me different here. They do still see me as something a little unique, which is okay. But it's also going, where can they realize their own unconscious bias? And that's where I try to do the subtle, how about you ask their dad who's standing right there? Because I haven't talked to them. In those kinds of ways. So I think those are the things that, just how how can we be better? Well, there's a lot of things we can do in simple ways, and there's a lot of very complex things that need to be reorganized and systematically set up differently. But it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take that recognition, that reflection. There's going to take honest, hard conversations from women to come out and have these conversations, and that's where, I it's been 22 was really rough. There was the Guardian articles last summer about me being sexually assaulted by my head coach, and me and four other women. And so, that article and that whole thing, though I've been speaking about it for years to put it on a public platform, that started in February of 22. And I'm still dealing with it today, So those are things that are emotionally tied that, when I talk to a lot of male colleagues, they're just like, I can't believe that's part of, like, I see you on the sideline and I can't believe that's part of what your journey has been. And I don't believe that there's not bad things that happen on the men's side, but then it's almost this assumption that, well, I should be weak, or I should be more emotional, or I should, and it's like, no, like, just as we all do, we face adversity, we face things that we expect and we don't expect. And if we love something that we do, then we keep going, we find ways. And that's what I've done. Is I love the game, I love coaching it, I love working in it, I love talking about it, I love women being in the space to talk about it and finding their voice, and I want to help that. And so no matter what has happened to me, if that passion burns, strong enough, you just keep going. That's a human. That's not a female or a male. That's just a human. And so, lots of support from that article. I don't want to say there was a mass amount of support from people to come forward with what happened to me, but the realization too of how they even perceived who I was now, knowing that information and who they've seen for years, is kind of shocking that they wouldn't assume I would be okay to still fight through, because I want to fight and I want to keep going. So I don't know. It's just interesting. I think, as people are interesting to watch and hear. And I think that's one of the things that's cool, is we get to kind of sit back.
Of course, which is exactly what I'm doing now, listening to you. And it's just fascinating because, like, you can take the platform away, which you have done, and it's just been soaking up everything you say. I've been making notes while you've been talking, and for me, it's been nice just to sit back and listen to everything you have to say. And when you came out with that, about sexual assault, it was like, whoa, really? Because it's quite impersonal in a way, and sometimes when those sort of things happen to people, they don't like to express or open it, especially on a public platform which could be listened to by others. But in a way, I'm sorry that it has happened, but then it's great that you're open to talk about it and address it, because unless that you do, it's not going to change the game. And when I spoke to a female referee the other week, I was having a lot of discussion with her, but as I was listening to her, I was like, what about safeguarding? What about your own health and safety? What about when you're in that position? And especially if you're the referee of a game, referees don't have the safest of environments anyway, but especially as a young female girl, and you're in a male-dominated, and all it takes is you to go out to a car park and some fan sees you, I'm like, you're at so much risk. And my heart sort of went out to her straight away, and she was like, oh, no need to worry, and this and that. And she was quite comfortable with it, which I was glad, but it's like, well, but you are at a risk all the time, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, you are. And I think that's one. Thank you for saying I'm sorry. That's one of the easiest things people can do when a victim discloses. So thank you. Like, I want to just echo that is the easiest thing you can do if somebody tells you something. And it's a really amazing, simple few words to help things. I do think, yeah, you do. I mean, every coaching course I've taken outside of the A license I'm in right now, I've been the only or one of two. So any in my coaching education journal, all that. So you go, naturally coaching education is not one just experience to, learn and experiment with different sessions and topics and discussions, but it's a networking, it's a socializing environment, going out after the course at night and, having some drinks and talking about the day or what you do. And it's all part of it. But I am 100% different in terms of my, the safeties that I have to put around myself. And I think that's that is one because of my lived experiences, having to have had that experience happen. But two, I think it's also the fact that unfortunately we haven't talked about this as being a part of a regular occurrence in our game, and it is unfortunately far too common, not just on the female side but on the male side as well, that abuses aren't discussed. Physical, sexual, emotional, all of that. We kind of hide that. We put it under the rug and hope that it doesn't come out. Um, but what I can say is that, because we're so uncomfortable talking about it, and because we've hidden it for so long, there's a lot of people that don't know how to handle that conversation. And so um, it can trigger for them. It can make them, really uncomfortable. They can distance from you. But I think what I have found more often is that people kind of like you, where there is a guy or two that, respects the fact that I'm married, but just enjoys the company and talking and all that. And, they kind of become that bodyguard safeguard. I know I was in a course a couple of years ago where there was somebody at the bar that I could kind of read was doing something that I was like, I don't think I'm in line with what's going on right now. I'm kind of picking up a signal, but I don't know. And he was picking up something he was very uncomfortable that I would have to experience, and he stepped in right away, and that's nice. And I think that's part of it too. Is as men, as the majority of what it is how can you call one another out when it does cross the line? And it's not even calling out, it's also calling in. And I think that's the thing that I've changed, is that when I speak out, it's going, listen, I'm gonna share something with you because I know you care about the game. I know you want the best for your players, your staff, whoever you're working for. So let me give you just a little bit of insight that when you say this or you do this, this can be sometimes the perception or the response. I am not speaking for the entire female gender. There are women that will have different responses than I do. That's not my role. But I can tell you in the discussions, and I'm willing to do that for you, is say, listen, you you have to understand. There's a fun. I have one quick story on this because we took a team over and did a tour in Europe with an American youth team, and it was a group of like 14-year-old girls, and it was a male coach and me. And we arrived, we hadn't got all of our luggage yet, and so the players we had a training session, and they just had t-shirts on, and it was chilly. And so they're 14-year-old girls, and it's cold, and they have their arms crossed like this as the male coach is talking to them. And he goes, put your arms down next to you. It's like a sign of disrespect. It looks like you don't care. This is a body language. And I don't disagree that their body language could be perceived. So after he does the discussion, I pull him to the side and I go, they're 14-year-old girls who are developing breast, and it's cold. They're probably covering up. And he was like, oh. And to him, he was like, thank you. He goes, it doesn't even occur to me that that could be something that they're sensitive about. And so he, and he even brings it up because we're good friends now, that like those are things. But I've coached guys and looked at him and gone, okay, dude, this is what happened. And I have no idea. I had a young boy who told me, coach, I feel like my balls are in my throat. Sorry. He got hit so hard. And I was like, well, I know anatomically that can't happen, but what's the recovery time on that hard of a hit? Because I didn't know. I don't know. So he was like, he should probably be good for the next game, but you might want to check on him at warm up. Because I was like, listen, I've seen him get hit enough. I know how to kind of manage that situation. But he was like, coach. And for a young 13-year-old boy to look at his female coach and say, coach, I think my balls are in my throat. That hurts so bad. And I was like, okay, cool. You're at least comfortable enough to share what you're really feeling like, but I don't know the recovery time on that. So we have these open conversations and we just ask. And you just get better because you ask and you understand that there's differences, but you have this awareness to learning and growing.
Absolutely, and it's great that you address that, because sometimes as a male coach you may not realise certain things when it comes to coaching females, and you may not even consider some of it, and it can be vice versa when females are coaching males. So it's just about that extra awareness, or having maybe a female advocate or a female assistant, or someone who can just advise you and just go, oh, just by the way, because that can just be so helpful just to have a 30-second insight. And it just comes down to addressing the people that we work with, working with players, and certainly making sure that we're meeting their needs, and being considerate of the fact, because we're going to be in all different circumstances, environments and spaces with them, and they're going to react in different ways, and we're going to go through different personalities and different needs of players. It's that importance of understanding them, and certainly the genders that we're with.
Yeah, and race is the same thing. We're seeing that all over the game is racist comments that are being put out from fans, from one player to the other, homophobic slurs, all of those things that are a part of it. And I think what is great is that we're having the discussions about it. There are consequences now for it. I don't know if the consequences yet have met the women's game. I think it's starting to, and we're seeing it in the NWSL, for male coaches that have crossed the line of sexual assaults and abuses and harassment of female players, and really holding their position of power in that request for favors and different things that they've done. But I do think there's a lot more going into the discussions, and we see it. And when we have consequences, that the consequences are true professional consequences, that clubs don't then go hire these individuals. And I think that's the part that, unbeknownst to me, that, a year ago this month, I was in the United Soccer Coaches as a national convention in the U.S. And so it was in Kansas City, which is where I'm located. And I was fortunate enough to present on a couple occasions in that, and we'll be presenting next week in Philadelphia. But they, I remember there was a question about the whole Chicago Red Stars, because Roy Dames, who had, literally resigned the day after the championship, there was a lot of questions. And, I knew for a fact, I had already been outspoken about what happened to me with the coach sexually assaulting me. And his best friend that I knew of was in the room. And so to know that I'm going to have to speak to someone who knows my, you know, the predator I had in my life, one of the things that I said was, your friends, there are friends and people you idolize that are going to come crushing down. And I didn't know the Guardian articles. That wasn't even a conversation at that time. But I said, what we have to do is, we cannot excuse the carnage they've left behind, all of the abuse, all of the destruction, and give it an okay because they had these little bouts of success. Because that is where we really as a society are messing up, because we're excusing all of the bad stuff they've done and all of the people they hurt, which is, that number is so much higher. That pile of, I call it carnage and destruction, is enormous, but we're just turning away from it to look at the 1 to 2 successes. I mean, Simone Biles in the Olympics last summer, or 2 summers ago, I don't know where we're at with timeline, but her coming out with mental health issues, and those things are still things that spiral from being abused by, the infamous now Larry Nassar. Those things are real. They come, and they come at different points. And I think that's part of the game, is that, one, we need to be more trauma informed. Leaders, coaches need to understand that you are going to have athletes and staff that have trauma in their life, and we need to become more trauma informed. We need to be comfortable dealing with trauma, hearing it, knowing that somebody experiences it. And then 2, when we take that education and become trauma informed, I think we can get into better decisions on how we hire, and then how we manage staffs, and understanding there may be triggers and different things in their life and their lived experiences that could potentially lead to, situations that we need to be aware of. I do know that I have players on my team, the women's team, and for a fact, that have been sexually assaulted. So if I just go in every practice talking about my own experiences, that might actually trigger them, and that's not what I want. So I do, as the coach, as the person in charge, have to understand that there are lived experiences that some of my players have, that the way I act or say things could trigger them. And that might be the same as a man screaming at me, that at times now is triggering, because that's what the guy did to me. And so that trigger of, I'm less than, I'm not worthy, you have other intentions, it's not fair to the person yelling at me, who might not have those same intentions, but it's hard to disassociate. And it takes a lot of work on the self to disassociate those triggers that you have in your own mental and physical health. So, in all of it, I think there's just so much that can be done. We can do more, we can see more, but the game has to be willing to evolve. And that comes at the people that are making the decisions and influencing the next steps of the game, and them being more educated on biases, on racism, on gender discrimination, on all of these things, homophobia, all of that has to come into play. And understanding then that because we don't have it in the forefront, we haven't done a good job of calling it out, we haven't had consequences, there's a lot of trauma, and therefore we have to be trauma informed in order to be able to manage these next steps of people being in the game that love the game but have a really negative memory associated to it.
Yeah, and again, so many important points there, especially when we talk about lived experiences, trauma, and sometimes talking about our own experiences can trigger, the young people or individuals that we work with, and you know, not every coach or professional will be aware of that, as we said again, and if they're going out and sharing those experiences by default, which they will, because it comes back down to that comfort as we have as humans, and if we're comfortable talking about something, then we're going to put it out there. It could trigger someone else. So again, it's that importance of dialogue, that importance of communication, but the importance of understanding the clientele that's in front of us and who we're working with, and it can create that better harmony and better understanding and support mechanisms. And when it comes to, as you say, to hiring of coaches and creating a process, or hiring of individuals within these roles, it's really important in terms of that accountability, and everything that we talk about in terms of improving the game is how it's going to come out there, and it's this complete advocacy for change, and talking about it and highlighting these situations, which is going to really improve the health and safety, and certainly the comfortability of allowing individuals to come into the sport.
Mm-hmm. And that's really, at the end of the day, I coach, in essence, the two women's teams, the college team, the professional amateur team, and then I work as a U.S. soccer instructor, so I teach grassroots licensing. And then, but at the heart of what I'm doing, kind of day in and day out, is the mentorship program I run called Fearless and Capable, which is really that avenue for women to find relatable people that they can share, they can feel um, less potentially judged for what they're going to share, or some even come in with experiences to validate they might not be the only one that's seen or heard that. And this program is really at the core of it trying to improve mindset, and not just improve, sometimes it's just embrace the mindset, they already have it, it's just that fear of taking it on. And then the capable part is really talking about the fact that we're not, I'm not, and we're not, as women, being asked to be hired just because I'm a woman. I want to be good enough, I want to have the skill sets that includes not only what I'm naturally capable of, or the self education I do, but who are the people willing to give me access to information, give me access to knowledge. Those are important pieces. And so what we found a lot of times is those can be really difficult to find. And so Fearless and Capable, as being a virtual platform that's available 24/7 to interact with women across the country, across even the world, and varying different levels in the sports industry. It's not just coaches, lots of women holding different roles and titles within the sports industry, and across sports, then gives us the opportunity to collaborate, gives us opportunity to be validated that we're not the only ones. It gets a little less isolating. And then the other thing it can do is it can come into spaces where there are amazing leaders that maybe more of the majority, and speaking frankly, more white males that want to be great allies, that want to do more. And the bigger thing when I come into them is, and we partner or work together, is I'm not the mentoring. You still have a huge role in mentoring your coaches, your staff, but you are missing a component of relatability. And relatability is really, at the end of the day, the ability to repeat or have a consistent application of something. And so that consistent application is the fact that these are women, and we are women who can come in and probably help that feeling of isolation be a little less, because they can see the repeated representation of women in the sport. And so that's really where it comes down to, is we're not the mentorship. We don't just take your female staff and say, good, you do the guys and we'll get the girls. But that's not how this works. It's us working together and kind of coming in and saying, yep, it is hard to get females. I know there's not a ton. We're not hiding them, in in a basement somewhere releasing them one at a time to the public. Like we are truly lower in numbers, but we need to increase. But there's a lot of things that this game systematically has to improve in order for them to feel more welcome. And then the other thing that has to happen is that, willingness to kind of link arms between genders. And really, I should say, in my own belief, it's not just male and female, non-binary and all, that we link together and say, listen, we all want to be great coaches, just great coaches or great people. But this has nothing to do with the fact that I have to have the responsibility of bringing more women in and you get to just get that, that fruit of that labor. No, that's not how that works. Because if you're not showing me that you have allyship, that you have structure, that you have the ability to look at your unconscious and conscious bias, listen, the women that I do get to have the opportunity to have a relatable mentorship relationship with, do you think I'm going to tell them to go work for you? No, you still have to show me that you're still in that space of being someone that's a true ally for minorities. And that's where, I think some come in thinking fearless and capable can just do that for them, when it's not. It's a working relationship. And that's really where I get a lot of joy in, is not just working with the mentees and the women. I love it. I love getting on calls and learning more and helping and connecting them and giving them resources and introducing them to people. But at the same time, I love coming in with, the guys and saying, listen, I know you want to be better. I know you do, because there's a lot that do. They want to do so much and really want to be open to it and do struggle to find women. But I also say, listen, if we can come in and work together on this, I think we're going to get a lot further than you just assuming it's my responsibility to get more women in the game, because that's not how that's going to work at the end of the day. So,
well, it's there's been so much to take away from that, and as I said, I made so many notes, and it's been incredible to sit back and just take away everything so much, because you delve into so many different areas and so much which really creates that accountability, and especially for those professionals who may listen to this at higher levels and various levels that they'll listen to it from, and try to understand the perspectives and try to improve the systems that you talk about. And it's really important to have that platform for females as well who might listen to this, or other genders, etc., for their own representation and how that could shape in terms of what they do within their practice. And the hour's flown by, and I know I could sit here for another few hours talking to you. And originally when we spoke, it'd be we agreed an hour or previously, but I've really enjoyed it, and I'd love to absolutely have you on again, because you are truly incredible, and I've honestly really enjoyed it, and we definitely have to get another one in, or whatever. But I am so grateful for your time, and it's been fascinating. So massive kudos to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I always get that. Nice to meet you, and be able to kind of put a face to the name and everything. But the fact that you are giving voices to minorities, like, thank you. It's huge. So please keep doing that. Keep finding people that are doing really, really amazing work. And when we can lift those voices up and retweet, share, do the simple things on social media that don't cost anything, we actually do a lot to help. And that's really what I can leave it with, is happy to have another conversation, but keep doing this. This is really, really great. And I love the name of it. I love the name of the podcast. So thank you. That Reflective Coaches.
Thank you very much. I love that, and I'll certainly take that away as well. But it's great, and that's exactly what I want to do, is create those voices and certainly open up about these discussions, and certainly try to advocate it more and create that platform. And you say we are coaches, and essentially Coaches United, and that's what we just want to be labelled as. And it's about creating that community. But it has been fantastic. I wish you and your children and your husband good luck, and
thank you.
Enjoy the hotel and the studies. Good luck with the A license, but let's definitely keep in touch, and I look forward to seeing your work, and let's definitely do it again.
Absolutely. You have a wonderful day, and I don't know what time zone you're in, but yes, thank you. I appreciate it, and best of luck for the remainder of the guests you've got in the next little bit. So
thank you very much.
All right, talk to you soon.
Yep.